Okay, we're live with a completely out of the blue live stream for which I'm not responsible. Right, Charis?
Maybe.
Maybe. Okay. Um, a short introduction. We had the idea that since we have someone with a little experience uh, on being an evangelist or being a creationist to try and help us sharpen our skills a little bit. Because in the period that we've been working together, I can call it working, uh, we've run into a couple of things that I seem to be doing wrong. Maybe not necessarily wrong, but that I could do better. So we have a couple of points lined out, at least to start with. People in the chat, when you get here, when you are here, if you have a question, um, feel free to jump in with a question. What I wanted to start with is attitude. How important, Charis, is attitude?
It's immensely important. Um, I mean, believe it or not, atheists and intelligent design proponents do belong to the same species, and we all pick up on the same social cues. And when they're on the defense, we can sense it. When we're on the defense, they can sense it. Attitude is huge.
Okay, and what would you say you are not only on YouTube, but you're on Twitter as well, albeit that not a lot of people know where to find you. But what would you say is the attitude of atheists on Twitter? Are they doing it wrong, or could they improve?
Well, like with anything, I think there's always room for improvement for all of us. I think many of the stumbling blocks that we come across are the same ones that many Christians come across, or Muslims, or anybody who is dealing with a member of the other group. It pretty much comes down to tribalism. How do we speak with those who belong to a different political tribe, a different religious tribe? Um, do we treat them with animosity? Do we treat them like they're aliens? How do we regard them? Yes, Max the atheist, he
Yes.
said, haha, we sense this. It's with our crystal balls.
Yes. Well, if you, at least it's my experience. Uh, if you're going to set out to at least have a meaningful conversation, um, my easiest way is that I try to approach them as I would like to be approached. But you can pick it up from the answers quite quickly. If you ask a question or invite them to a conversation, which is what I usually do, um, the way the answer comes, I think, is a good clue of the mindset on the other end. And where what I found is that it's you can actually diffuse the situation a lot, but you can also make things worse by addressing specific points. So, Karis, you've told me that a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are, when it comes to people that actively go out and seek interaction with atheists, do have some kind of preparation.
Yes.
What was the preparation? What was the preparation you were familiar with?
The preparations that I was familiar with largely came from Answers in Genesis and Living Waters Ministries, which is Ray Comfort, Kirk Cameron.
Mm-hmm.
They would send us out, as the Bible says, sheep amongst wolves. They would say to arm us with the fruits or arm us with the Spirit, shield of faith, etc. But they would also have the evangelism training course, and we would learn kind of get a jack of all trades, bird's eye view of all the possible objections that our prospective atheists might throw at us about the Bible. And we try to kind of memorize all this stuff and come up with a soundbite answer for everything so that we could get something in before we go into our gospel presentation, which was basically an emotional appeal, which, I mean, isn't a bad thing. We're people, we are emotional. That's one thing that I think the church gets right in recruiting, because we are so emotional. Yes, even atheists.
Yes, I think I'd be poster boy when it comes to being emotional. We have 2 points. Do you want to address specific points that are quite common, that are used by creationists or evangelists to present to atheists, or do you want to go to the emotional part first?
Well, it's not really their points, the specific sound bites. It's more the method underlying how they get to those points. They come at us with specific sound bites. How did this part of the blood evolve alongside with this part of our blood and still work cooperatively and not have our entire blood break down if one thing doesn't, work the way it's supposed to with all the other parts. Just those specific things, when the underlying problem is they don't understand how evolution works. They don't understand mutation. They don't understand natural selection. And that's where we get these sound bites that, sound like they stand, but really they don't have a leg to stand on, because they're just said out of lack of education. It sounds prideful, it sounds mean, and I also can't really say a whole lot where education is concerned, because I don't have a whole lot myself for, in biology. But the reason you would
Okay.
even present that argument, an evangelism encounter, is because you don't know the science behind it. Otherwise, you wouldn't dare ask that.
Yeah. And so my first approach then would be to try and figure out what my opponent actually knows about the facts.
Yeah.
What should we do if we find out they don't know enough?
Be accepting
Should
of
we?
them. First, I mean, I know this seems a little bit off the topic of what they're actually saying, but get off the topic of what they're actually saying. They think that they are kind of in a battle of, it's a war between good and evil, between right and wrong, between God and Satan. They legitimately think that they are a soldier in God's army coming at you with this and trying to defend themselves against the fiery darts of the enemy, which they believe you to be kind of an agent in sending them at them. So
Mhm.
disarm them. Just show them that you're a human being, and while you're doing that, then address what they're saying. If that made any sense.
No, that did make any sense. Now let's suppose y- you get a different feeling at that point, and you get the feeling that the animosity could be rising. How would you best counter that?
Usually with lower your own animosity, because people tend to mirror what the other person is doing. It's not necessarily saying that's what they're doing, but humans have a tendency to mirror the other person. It could be that you're giving indications yourself of animosity and you don't realize it. And also there's just the fact that no matter how gently you try to put it, you are still saying that they're wrong, and that attacks sometimes their very identity. So it's expected that they're going to be on the defense. Just do your best to diffuse the tension. Keep your own manner calm. Just stay calm, reasonable. And by reasonable, I don't mean, being as sharp as you possibly can and giving the excuse, I'm for a reason. Don't do that. Please don't do that.
Well, what I've tried, at least the last couple of months, is I watched a lot. I learned a lot from Anthony Magnabusco, who's doing street epistemology. He does it in just 5 minutes. I think that's if you can get anywhere in 5 minutes. I don't think I could do it. But ask questions in a way that they are non-threatening, and ask questions about the things that they should know more about, maybe their own convictions or their own views on how the earth came to be,
how they came to those convictions.
Yes.
What their sources are, that sort of thing.
I'm looking at Keith. He says there's a difference between people who are curious and people who think they have the answers, when they're constantly misrepresenting, like Ray Comfort. And he says, in my opinion, speaking to the audience is the target there. I'm not sure
if there is an audience, or if there is an audience. Yes.
Yes, if there is an audience. Well, on Twitter, there's always an audience. But I still think that if you want to get to the audience, at least you have to get to the person that you're talking to, and so that's still important. People have asked me what we are doing, and if that's even important, and if we are on YouTube trying to convert people, and I usually say that's not what we're going to do, because it'll be quite difficult to convert people in a 1 hour talk. So
right.
that shouldn't even be the aim.
Well, I'd also ask that individual who's asking, do you personally have a problem with trying to convert a person from one view to another? For instance, from an atheist to the Christian perspective. Do they necessarily have a problem with that? And if they say they don't have a problem with evangelism, then I would just pause and say, okay, cool. Then I guess we'll proceed then.
Yeah.
I mean, even if we are evangelizing, even if we are, anyone who does not have a problem with Christian evangelism should not hold a double standard like that.
Yeah, that's correct. But let's say they keep on just focusing on this particular point, that you must be aiming to get them deconverted or to shake their belief or whatever you could come up with at that point.
Well, that goes
If
into mind reading. Apparently, they know our intentions better than we do. That's sarcasm.
I wouldn't just call it mind reading, because for what I see, when I look at videos, when I look at websites, when I pretty much everything that's out there for people to find, it's expected that the source they're going to knows what the atheist thinks. And that's pretty much what you encounter online with, I'd say, almost every believer of every stripe.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree?
There could be a very concrete reason for that too, and that's because, well, they can't directly counter the Bible. And the Bible says, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. I mean, the Bible tells them what to believe about atheists. It doesn't, I shouldn't say it tells them what to believe, but it tells them what they believe is truth about how atheists think. And if that is where they get their thinking from, if they do hold the Bible up as truth and the standard for it, then they're going to believe what it says about atheists and about how we think. And when we present them with a different view on how we think, we're actually directly contradicting what the Bible says, and it's very difficult and scary. I mean, it's scary for them to start wondering just how accurate the Bible has us painted, how accurately the Bible has us painted. Because if they find themselves in direct contradiction, direct willful contradiction of the Bible, that can be a scary place for them to find themselves in. And so we have that to deal with. Not just, whether or not how we view certain things as atheists is accurate or not. I mean, we know it's not accurate, but they don't. And if they start to know it's not accurate, then they have to backpedal like crazy. 77 Cents says, how do you know it's scary? Because I've been there. And I'm not saying that for every Christian it is scary, because some of them might not have a problem contradicting the Bible. But those who do view the Bible and what they say as, that's not even, he says, it's not accurate. That's not what we're talking about right now. He says, how do you know it's scary? Because I've been there. And maybe for, like I was saying, for some Christians, they might not have a problem contradicting the Bible, but many Christians do.
Just for the record, my 77 cents came in a little bit later, so I expect he didn't catch the introduction. What we're going for here is trying to have a better and a more meaningful conversation. It's not about presenting facts. It's not about whether or not the Bible is accurate, yes or no. It's about having a better conversation. So while you can ask why we know the Bible isn't accurate, we
That's
would
for a whole
be
different
able
show.
we would be able to give several answers which we could demonstrate to be true. So that wouldn't be a problem, but that's not this show. If you want to contribute, you could maybe offer your own reactions to things that I'm asking Charis here. So feel free to do that. It threw me a little bit off. I remember talking about scary. At least you've been there when you
Like having
encountered
doubts.
some having doubts and encountering someone who actually tried to help and correct me if I'm wrong, didn't go out to straight deconverting you or convincing you of
They
that what
didn't
you
go for the
believed.
jugular like I expected.
Yes. So, can you tell me what this person did different from what you expected, and what would be the good or maybe the bad side about it?
What I expected, well, first, they weren't the type of person that I expected, because the Bible talks about the lack of morals of the godless. You know, how there's conceited, boastful, hateful, malicious, and the list of all the other things that will get you sent to hellfire. All these things about the godless. And then I see this person who makes no mention of God or otherwise, and they're not being any of that. And I see from their interactions with other people that they still aren't being any of that with them. They don't fit that profile. And the Bible is either true on that or it isn't. And many people will say, well, they're putting on an act, or they're just trying to make a point. They're just trying to make a point of not following what the Bible says. They're really like that on the inside. They'll have to make all the explanations to make this person still fit the profile of the Bible. And you kind of have to do that. You have to square them with the Bible. Otherwise, you risk running counter to the Bible. As a fundamentalist Christian, that can land you in a world of psychological discomfort.
Okay, but how would you even be able to approach it in the right way, because not everyone is the same?
What do you mean, from the
Do
Christian,
you think
from a Christian standpoint or atheist?
from an atheist standpoint? Because although I think that we both have our emotions, when it comes to someone who has believed in the Bible for their entire life, it's a little bit more than being convinced whether or not a book is accurate.
Yes.
There's a little bit more involved. Whereas for an atheist, the issue might just be the book as such, and not a lot of
Many who,
emotional.
right. There's, for an atheist, or somebody from a different religion who has never actually lived lived the Bible, who's never really lived there. They look at the Bible from a logical, factual standpoint, kind of, as we would study a textbook. Is this accurate or isn't it? And somebody who is a Christian of a certain stripe, they can't read it as, is this accurate or isn't it? They read it as, this is accurate. Why doesn't the rest of the world understand this? And if this
Yes.
actually isn't accurate, I mean, if I was to actually think that this wasn't accurate, do I actually trust what God is saying? And if I don't trust God, then that can really put me at odds with him. And you don't want to be at enmity with the creator of the universe. That's really not a good position to be in from their point of view.
But these are things, I'm sure that there are a lot of atheists who come from some kind of Christian denomination or Muslim, but in this case, you're talking to a lifelong atheist who has no experience with churches, has no experience with religion in any way, shape, or form. And so, for me, it's extremely hard to um, to relate to what it must mean. So um, let's just say that we're out to have a meaningful conversation. The one thing I'd want to avoid, and not because it would make my position any stronger, is hurting the other party in any way.
Right.
Are there specific things I need to keep in mind? What are
Depending
the
on the
most common mistakes?
one of the most common missteps that we can make is
Yeah.
assuming that they're approaching this the same way that we are, and also making it too much us and them, because we're all just people, drinking our coffee, going to bed, taking our slippers off, going to bed. We're just people. As much as some of them might think this is a spiritual war, we don't have to think about that, and we do not have to view them as the enemy. That's one of the quickest ways to radicalize somebody, is to put them firmly and irrevocably into the them category. And so often we see a person of a different religion and put that person in the them category in everything else as well. And we forget, maybe they're just like us in every respect except for religion. Maybe religion isn't everything that they are. It's not everything that we are. Why should we make the assumption that their conversation with us about religion means that they are just, a person who just thinks about religion 20%? They're not just a person, just a talking head for religion. They are a person, and we need to remember that while we're speaking to them.
Well, that would at least be one of the mistakes that that I've tried to point out. I think actually I did that earlier today somewhere. I'm not sure exactly why and where, but I do remember that I did point it out. It's not and us, because we are as different as they are. So, but and I'm looking at the list that we had. I think we covered a little bit of everything we had on the list. I can jump in I can jump in with something that I just noticed in the chat, and I'm going to use my 77 cents here in this, because now we're in a conversation about how to handle the other one with a little bit more respect. What my 7 cents is saying is that if you're interested in having a better conversation, you'll either need to avoid saying things like, we know the Bible is inaccurate, or be prepared to explain why you would say that.
That's talking about a totally different aspect of the conversation.
But what I want to address in this is that if you want to have a meaningful conversation, I don't think that it's that you should avoid saying things or giving someone the false belief that they are agreeing with you on certain points. Being
Right.
honest is key in having a meaningful conversation. And if you would strike a point where you both disagree, then you disagree, and the way you handle this disagreement is a lot more important than which of the two of you is accurate at the time. And
Well, I mean,
but go ahead.
to go along with that, I mean, also think of your audience. We are here addressing other atheists. When Christians are in church addressing other Christians, they're not avoiding saying, we know that the Bible is true, and then bracing themselves for having to defend that position. Their audience is Christian, and that's who they are talking to specifically. Other Christians who, I mean, their belief that the Bible is true is a given. They don't have to sit there and avoid saying that amongst the people that they're addressing. You and I in this particular conversation are addressing other atheists. Yes, we're talking about how we interact with Christians, but right now we are talking to each other and talking to other atheists. We do not have to qualify our belief that the Bible is inaccurate in X, Y, and Z, because right now Christians are not the ones that we are addressing in this. And if we
Yes,
want to talk
and
about the accuracy or inaccuracy of the Bible, then that would be for, a video in which we are speaking with Christians on our respective beliefs about biblical accuracy.
yes, like I would say pretty much most of the talks that we do.
77
At
cents
least
says,
myself.
okay, I thought I was part of the conversation here. Now I understand. It's kind of like a discussion in church concerning how better to address atheists as Christians. You're not there to debate the atheist. You're there to address the Christians on how to speak with atheists. And in that discussion with other Christians, you're going to, say that, yeah, we believe the Bible is correct, etc., etc. I mean, you may not say that in that particular conversation, but if you do, just because there's an atheist sitting there doesn't mean that that opens the debate up for this topic.
Yeah, and I also think that he can be part of the conversation because the topic is interacting. So if you think that you have a tip for us on how to interact better, and that's something that doesn't have anything to do with who's right on a certain position. If you think you have a tip on how to approach people better and how to make at least to convey that what you want to do is have a meaningful conversation. It's not a game. It's not something you win. At least that's not my approach on Twitter or on YouTube. It's trying to have a meaningful conversation. And you can come up with points that make me think. I can come up with points that make you think, at least if the conversation is meaningful enough.
Right. And I mean, remember here, we're not talking about fact checking a certain statement. We're talking about more mindset and methods. We're not talking about, whether the Bible is accurate on this point or that point, or whether we think the Bible is accurate on this point or that point and why. We're talking about methods of discussing, just the method of discussing the accuracy of that point made in Scripture with another Christian. How our approach to that Christian might improve and all that.
Well, at least he helped me go to another topic, because I want to mention him, but I completely forgot his name. I got a guy on Twitter had a short conversation with him and asked him, because that's what I do at the start of a conversation. I'll ask him, do you want to have a conversation here, or do you want to go live with me at some point? So he asked me if he could check out what I meant. So I said, go watch my channel. I do have a co-host. She has. She's not always available on the times that I'm available, so I can't guarantee that she'll be on. That's a first. And just go and check out my or our channel. I still have to get used to the fact that it's not my channel anymore. To our channel.
It's your channel.
No, it's our
we
channel.
argue about this all the time. No, it's your channel. No, it's our channel.
Yes, yes. And this time we're arguing in public. I still think it's our channel, and if people want to check out the description, I think that would speak for itself. That point is done. But he checked out the channel, and he came back and he said he would like to have a conversation. At that point, I stopped talking to him. There was only one problem. At that point, two other people came in and were still talking to him. In the part that led up to him going to check out the channel, what I found out is that he thought that evolution was impossible, and that he had a conversation, and that if I would want to know what he thought about evolution, I was to go and look up that conversation, because that's something he didn't want to discuss with me, which I think was a little bit dishonest, because if you want to have a meaningful conversation, the first thing you need to do is not skip parts of what might come up.
Actually, I think he was being very honest, because I have certain limits on what I will and will not discuss, because I have been diagnosed with PTSD, with traumatic events from before. And he was just, in my opinion, he was being honest just right up front about what he is willing to discuss. Besides evolution, there's a slew of other things to discuss with a religious person, creationist or otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't dishonest, it may not have left the conversation as open as somebody like us might like, but he was being very honest. We may not like it, but it was honesty.
Yeah, what I meant to say is that discuss it because he had discussed it with someone else.
So he pretty much just didn't want to repeat himself.
If I would want to have my information, if I would want to know how he thought about things, I was to go and look for the answers myself, which I don't do. Just for the reason that I might get something wrong. If I ask my own questions, I'll get the answers I'm going for. But that was just part one.
I have a response to his method there. He's really limiting.
Let me complete the method, because he kept asking me what I thought about the Bible, and I said, well,
go look it up. What I think about the Bible.
To me, it is just a book, which threw him in defense mode again, and basically was telling me that if this is your attitude, then a conversation doesn't make any sense, because if that's going to be your attitude, we're going to get nowhere. And that's where I thought it became real dishonest, because now he was basically saying, sure, we can have a conversation if you first agree with me that the Bible is the inerrant word of God, and that we should take it from there.
Right.
And
Unfortunately, yeah.
and that's not something that I'm going to give him. I was extremely polite in telling me that we might have different views. I wasn't out to mock his Bible, because that wouldn't help me at that point. And I left the conversation till I think 2 days later, when something came up and I responded, which I responded to. Maybe a stupid move on my part, because that was about something in the Bible. I don't even remember what. And I told him, listen, this is incorrect, and you can go there and there to check it out. And don't believe me, go check it out for yourself, and I can give you some sources to check it out. At that point, he said, well, if you're going to mock my Bible, then a conversation is out of the question. And within, I think, a couple of minutes, I was blocked.
There's not a
So
whole lot you
do you
can do with
think,
that, except to take that as a learning experience for how not to behave. Fortunately, he's in the minority. Most people, Christian or otherwise, do not behave so dishonestly. His whole, if you want to know what I think, look it up, that really limits the number of shows that he can be on. I mean, if he's only allowing his views to be discussed once and then makes everybody else look it up after that, well, I mean, he can only have, I guess, what, one show per topic? I
yeah,
mean, that's pretty self-limiting there. And he,
well,
well, the rest of it speaks for itself.
What I'm curious about is the mindset at that point. That
Extremely
even if
defensive.
I agree with 1 point, then it becomes dishonest. It becomes attacking his Bible. Do you think there's a way to get by this in any way, or is it your loss and move on to the next person
Sometimes
you
you have
want
to
to
take
talk
your
to?
loss. You might just kind of politely ask, you know, ask him about his thoughts on what his thoughts on the Bible, and understanding that people might disagree with that, and if it's okay if another person expresses their thoughts in the same way that he allows himself to express his. Basically point out, kind of show him that he's in a position of applying a double standard. And if he is okay with a double standard, that's no way to hold a conversation. And that's when I would cut my losses, because there is a certain amount of respect that I will require of somebody who speaks to me. I'm not going to go out and just hate on them and have a completely double standard for, hey, I can say my views, but I'm not going to let you say yours. And I mean, I have that standard for myself, and I will hold others to the same.
Mm-hmm. I have to admit, I gave him a lot more rope than I usually do, because we didn't have a guest on for quite a while, and I was trying to see if I could at least get someone on a short term. Now, at the moment, we have a couple of people lined up, so that's no longer a problem.
Keith made
We'll
such a
see
good
if
point in the chat. Keith X says those are the kinds of people. What's that? Oh, Keith was just saying in chat, those are the kinds of people I wouldn't debate without an audience. He sounds too fragile to have an honest conversation. Not with someone he views as a threat to his faith. Has to be done with his paranoid guard down. And he makes a good point about the mentality, and I don't say this derisively, the mentality of somebody who is a little bit on the fragile side. He can, in all likelihood, that guy could not actually take the criticism. He's not secure enough with it. He's not comfortable with having it questioned. He doesn't know how to answer it, or whatever reason. He has a huge, massive guard up.
Yes.
He's already put you in. He puts you in the position of enemy right off the bat.
Yes, and funny thing is, I wasn't going to question him. I was going to ask him what convinced him of everything. I was actually trying to go with him in a way where I don't put in anything, because I like to try it, and he seemed the perfect candidate for that. But yeah,
if you're talking to somebody regularly and you have the time, try to talk to them on topics that are completely not related to religion. They need to see that you are there as a person and not just as an enemy combatant, because that's pretty much where he had you painted by the sounds of it. Just try to get it takes time.
Try to get some common ground.
Yeah, even if it's just, you know, your favorite types of coffee or tea or food or, you know, sports teams or whatever. Let them see your personality. Let them see how you speak and how you're not just out to get them. Because
that was actually how I got to talk to him in the first place. Dropping the entire religion, atheist part, and trying to find some common ground. I also thought that the least threatening way of having a talk would be a good one, at least for me to test out if I could pull it off, because I still think it's one of the most difficult things that you can do, coming from my completely ignorant point of view, because I don't have a clue what I'm getting into. And that may sound as an excuse, but it's not.
No, it's not. Well, with somebody with a wall that high, it takes a lot more than normal. I mean, you can get in far enough to speak to him. That's just one chip. You've only taken one chip off that massive wall. I mean, you're not going to bring this wall crumbling down by talking to them about coffee either. I mean, that's only to open up a little window for speaking. I mean, it's not going to do the entire thing. And one thing that might help to put that person at ease is just asking questions instead of contending with them on a fact that they hold dear. Just ask the question about how they got to it, because it's not arguing with them. It's not necessarily putting them on the defensive. Don't try to have them prove something. Just ask them for information purposes, and then when they give you the answer, don't argue with them. It is their answer. You're asking them what they think, how they feel, and how they got there. This is completely subjective, and we have, you know, we're a separate person. We can't read their minds, and we have no say over how they think. Ask them what they think, and then just say, okay, thanks for telling me. Just accept their answer for what it is. They're just people, just like we are.
Yeah. And I think the moment in time could count as well, because you don't know what happened to the person in question that day. The chat, I don't know if he's still in the chat. My 77 cents
He's there.
came in this. Okay, well, I don't know if he's still there. If he isn't, I will point him to this part of the conversation because I'm actually going to mention him. He came in this chat, I think, a little bit more defensive than normally is the fact. When we have, first of all, we have spoken to him before, yet with you and me, but I've also spoken to him before that, an intake, because he was going to come on one of my talks, which for didn't happen. Um, one of them was mine because I couldn't get my talks rendered anymore, so it would be useless to make new talks. So I'm not saying that is his fault, but I did encounter two completely different persons. In the intake that I had with him, he had a completely different mindset than when he came on the talk, that, or even the chat he came in here. So I think, um, because I've seen another side, at least, I think a situation is something that comes in the talk we had with my 77 cents. There was three of us. I think Jackson was in on that as well, if I remember correctly, and I think even Marty was there. So it was a 4-against-1, and I think I would put up all my defenses if I'd been in a similar situation. So I can't blame him for that. Oh, he's still here.
I told you he's there.
So I've seen two different sides. Yeah, someone else was there at the beginning, and the one at the beginning was Charis. Charis dropped off later in the conversation, if I remember correctly. But at least I've seen two different sides, and I know that he's actually quite a cool guy to have a chat with. The part where he pulls up all his guards, and as I said, in that case, I think I would have done pretty much the same. So you can be prepared for everything. Maybe this time, if I would say to my 77 cents, listen, we've talked before, I think we should know where we stand.
No,
If one of us
it's not
is hyped
constant.
up at that, yeah, if one of us is a little bit hyped at that point, it should be a lot easier if you spoke before. But
Maybe, but I mean,
yeah.
just because you got a person's guard down once, and just because they got your guard down once, doesn't mean that that guard is just going to statically stay there. A person's guard will go up and down, and from just speaking with me, my guard goes back up. You have to get my
Oh yeah.
guard back down. I mean, a person's guard can be thrown back up at a moment's notice for factors completely out of their control sometimes. I mean, just because they've let their guard down and they were cool with us once, doesn't mean that they're just going to be constantly comfortable with us. And it's, if we know that things can factor into that, and if they aren't aware that things can factor into that, it kind of becomes our responsibility, due to our knowledge about it, to bridge that gap, to mind that gap, know that gap is there, and get them to where they're more comfortable for their sake.
I see what you did there.
I mean,
well,
we need to think about this as something other than just tactics. We have to make this more than just, I want them to listen to me. How do I get them to listen to me? This has to be more about than just tactics. We can't just make them into a tactical conquest. They can't just be a they and a them, like I've been saying in my past 2 sentences. I've been saying they can't be, they can't be. I understand that. I'm still putting them in the they and them. But they're people, just like us. We can't just approach this simply as tactics for getting through to the other side. We need to see them as people because they are. Make them comfortable because that's how we want to feel.
Yes, and I
we
think
don't want to feel like we're under threat, and they don't either.
No, and if you have a good conversation, neither of you will be threatened in any way. Away from the conversation with a few points you need to think about, but that's what the conversation is for.
I mean, there are some points that are going to make them feel threatened on some level, and there are some points that are going to make us feel threatened on some level. I think one of the best ways to do it is to just come out with it directly. Just say, I'm going to ask a question, and it could sound a bit uncomfortable, and I apologize for that in advance. Just approach it directly, honestly, gently, and just give them a moment to say yay or nay. That way they don't have to just be broadsided by it or blindsided by it.
Okay, I'm looking at the chat at the moment. Noticed we have another, at least another good friend of mine, I think, in the chat at the moment.
Oh, is that Craig?
No,
that's Diplomat.
That if I'm correctly, that's Diplomat 655. That's Steve in the chat.
Okay.
I don't know where he is in the talk at this moment, but he said, basically, Steve said his advice to people wishing to engage with a Christian is to realize we are all out hearts. We're really all out hearts love God. I'm not sure exactly what that means.
I understand what it means.
In the case, okay, so you tell what you think it means.
A Christian, well, like, we hear said all the time, many of them say Christianity is not a religion, it is a relationship with Jesus Christ. What he's saying right there is that when we're approaching Christians, we need to approach them with the understanding that we're pretty much saying that the person that they love with all their hearts doesn't exist. And we need to have compassion when we're approaching somebody, when we're coming at them with that. I mean, we can try to be gentle all day, but the reality is that we're here basically as a walking billboard that some people don't believe in the very existence of the person that they have. Their whole religion is around loving God, loving Christ, obeying Christ. Mm-hmm. He says it's not a joke for us. It's our whole life. And it hurts us deeply when people mock the God we love. So try not to fill your Twitter feed with things that are offensive and hurtful to us if your goal is to win us over. My answer to that is a yay and a nay. On one hand, when we're approaching a Christian directly, we need to approach them with the knowledge that they have emotional investment in what we're saying. On the other hand, we also will not be controlled by another person in what we put just in our own Twitter feed. We're talking here about just direct conversations with other Christians. Christians can say all they want about the absolute existence and divine nature and judgments and laws, anything that they want in that regard in their churches, and they do not have to have an atheist's approval for it. If you know what I'm saying. If he's listening, I don't know if he can hear. So in their own, basically, on their own turf is what I'm saying. They can say whatever they want. and they should be allowed to say whatever they want without us telling them they shouldn't. We're talking only about the face-to-face interactions.
Yes.
The opposite side of the coin is, you, Christian diplomat, when I'm speaking with you, I understand exactly where you're coming from, having been there. I know what it's like to love somebody and to be told that that person does not exist. And when I'm speaking with you, I will talk to you understanding that that's where you are. But it is not going to be productive to try to convince us that this is a loving God by telling us what we are and are not allowed to put on our own turf, our own timelines. Because we're going to be respectful towards you when we're interacting, but we will not be disrespected by having your law imposed on what we can and cannot say when we're with each other and on our own lawn, pretty much.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And there's something, yes, it does. And there's something that I want to add, because that's what I'm thinking of when I see the comments that you just read out. He has tried to convince me a couple of times that the way he interacts with me is coming straight from the fact that he's a Christian. Having talked to him a lot on Twitter, in DMs on Twitter, and in live conversations, and I'm very sad that the first one was lost because the recording software just quit on me. I'm pretty much convinced that the way he treats me is because that's who he is, and that has nothing to do with his religion, because he'll go out of his way to defend me with other Christians, and he's trying whatever he can to mend bridges, to try and get people back together again. And to me, it's saddening that he gives the credit for that to something or someone else. And I know Steve and I will have a lot more conversations, because I actually consider him a friend for several reasons, that for things that happened in the past that I've been talking to him. So I can say that he's an actual friend.
One thing I would caution against, and it comes in what you just said, there are a few tells that somebody from a Christian perspective might pick up on. When we find ourselves in a friendship, or in my case, a romantic relationship with a Christian, don't treat it like it's a surprising thing. They're just a person. I mean, atheists can be sweet, or they can be absolute dickwads. Same with Christians. I mean, they're just people with a religion that is different from what we believe is correct. But we should not find ourselves saying, I actually view this person as a friend, as if we ought to find that surprising. That just being a Christian does not make him an unlikely friend.
No, the fact that we became friends on Twitter without even meeting in person, and just by having conversations, that's what I still think.
I don't know, it happens all the
special.
time amongst, it happens all the time amongst atheists, and it is special no matter where it happens. And just be sure that we don't seem more surprised with a friendship with a Christian than with a friendship with an atheist, because that also adds to the us versus them mentality. Like, we're friends with them in spite of this, or in spite of some glaring.
What I'm trying to convey is that I can be friends with him even when we can fight tooth and nail on Twitter. And it's a lot less when we do a live conversation, because I
see what you're saying.
I still think that because of the fact that Twitter lacks intonation, a lot of things can go wrong in a written. But we can actually fight quite hard, and then still stay friends. I think actually that is something special, because believe it or not, he's an exception. And I'm pretty sure that to him, I might be an exception. So
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah,
now.
to me at least.
I had misunderstood.
To me at least. Yeah. So, and I also think that if you're truly a friend, then you can fight and you can talk the next day as if nothing happened, if you know at least where the other person is coming from, and we still have a huge barrier between us that gets both me and Steve, I think, emotional involved, and that might be a good final topic to address. And that's the fact that atheists view people as being part of the animal kingdom, whereas a theist, almost all denominations at least, think are especially created by God, and that they shouldn't be seen as part of the animal kingdom.
Can I say something to that, please?
Yes? Because I think I used all the wrong words in this.
No, you used the right words, but you said atheists regard people as part of the animal kingdom. I'd like to make a small amendment to that and say that naturalists, it's naturalists who believe that people are all part of the animal kingdom, because not all atheists disbelieve in the supernatural. Atheist only means not believing in a God, full stop. Some of them may still believe in supernatural stuff, or they might not believe in evolution. I mean, just because a person is an atheist does not mean they're a naturalist. So I'm just saying naturalists believe that we're all part of the animal kingdom.
Okay. But this was, at least it still is, between me and Steve, a huge problem, because I consider being human to be something special. So does he. The only thing that differs is the reason why. And that's a difficult one to bridge, I think.
We're not trying or needing to bridge gaps between beliefs. We're only needing to bridge the gap of basically our respective views of the humanity of the other person. Like we don't have to bridge the gap between beliefs. There doesn't have to be a bridge between evolution and creationism. There doesn't have to be a bridge between belief in God and non-belief in God. There only needs to be a bridge between our view of the other person and how we treat them, and how we come to them, interact with them, while they're expressing what they believe and while we're expressing what we believe.
Mm-hmm. I'm just letting Steve know, because he just said he can't hear the conversation. So he was only in the chat, which would make it pretty hard to respond to something. I think he just responded to the title of the video.
Mm-hmm. Just for people who are listening and don't know what's going on in chat, The diplomat just said, I cannot hear the conversation, so please accept my apologies if I'm off topic. But as another tip, please don't assume that what we've seen with our own eyes is a lie or delusion. That goes a little bit beyond the scope of what we're talking about, because it's talking about specifics about our relative beliefs about the beliefs held by the other person. We're just talking about how we approach the other person. They don't believe, they meaning diplomat, well, I'll just use diplomat as an example. He does not believe that what we believe is true. But he is asking us to not assume that what he believes is untrue. So there's that double standard again. We can actually believe that what the other person sees is something neurological. We can think that it is a quirk of how things in nature lined up at that moment.
Yes.
And like I said, how our mind, 77 cents says not what he believes, what he has seen. Like I said, what he has believed or what he's seen.
Yes.
We can indeed have our own beliefs about that.
And I can attest
like
to
he
that
can have his beliefs about us. Sorry.
Yes. And I can attest to that because I actually saw something at one point that later turned out to be a complete hallucination.
And that happens with completely healthy minds.
Yes, and that didn't take away anything of the fact that it was completely real to me at the time.
And that's a consideration we have to take to the other person. Yeah, we might not believe that it was real ourselves, but we have to go in there understanding that they do. A person sees what they see, and we're not mind readers either. We don't know the reasons they saw that. Who knows why they saw what they saw? We don't know that. We might not have evidence that what they saw is correct or incorrect.
There might be reasons for seeing things that actually aren't there. In my case, it was extreme stress. And I've had that explained, I think, years later, that the mind actually has a self-defense that kicks in and just basically shows you pretty pictures. So you're at a point where you can't take anymore. So here, go look at that.
That's a fun way of putting it.
How they explained it to me, and it is fairly logical as well, although it is different for different people. I had a girlfriend who just saw colors. So, but there is a built-in mechanism that can kick in. It's not that it always does kick in, and it can kick in different ways.
Right, but what we're trying to talk about isn't the truth or untruth of what they have seen or haven't seen, but how we approach the other person. Diplomat is saying, if you see something with your own eyes, do you believe it? And if I tell you you're deluded and didn't see it, what would you think of me? And we're not saying that they're deluded, but we have to approach them knowing that when we counter them, we are basically saying that what they saw is not correct. And on the other side of the coin, there's another side to this, Christians. You didn't realize this, but you say it all the time. And the word here is blind. But when you approach atheists, when we don't see what you believe is absolutely true and right there in front of our eyes, you are calling us blind. What should we think of you when you call us blind, willfully blind, whatever the phrase is that you want to call it? But if you say that we're just not seeing it, that we've been blinded by our own, sin or ignorance or what have you, that's equally insulting. So I guess the flip side of a Christian approaching an atheist is that with your position, you are coming towards us, telling us that we are basically blinded to the truth. No matter how you parse it, that's basically what's going on, even if you don't put it that way. So,
yeah.
I mean, there
But
has to be this
but I think,
understanding.
yeah, but I think Steve did make at least one very important point there, and that is where he mentioned, if it would happen to you, and if I tell you you are deluded, that's a point where I would agree with him, because
Mhm.
I wouldn't call him deluded.
No,
People can be wrong, and that has nothing to do with the delusion. You
right.
can simply be wrong. There can be a different explanation, one you might have not looked for, one you might not even want to look for because you're comfortable with the explanation you have.
Oh, that
In
brings up a
both
great
cases,
topic or a great point. Keep going. I'll wait.
uh, but so I would avoid to saying someone is deluded, because that's something that I cannot honestly say
Well, that's fighting
further
words. The
into
moment you call
investigation.
somebody deluded, if you personally call the other person deluded, no matter their religion, you just say, yeah, well, you're effing deluded. I mean, that's fighting words right there. You're not even trying to bridge a gap. You're
Yeah,
just basically being contentious for the sake of being contentious. Stop doing that. I see this happen all the time on both sides of the conversation. It's like, you guys need to cut it
yeah,
out.
so do I. And well, one thing we can hope for is that the conversations that we have on YouTube and that people can listen back to, at least helps to have more meaningful conversations, and in the end make people think, and that includes our side of the position, because we need to keep thinking as well.
Well, back to the point that
I
I
think
was
it's
wanting to
it's
make earlier.
okay.
You mentioned uh, the deluded phrase or term. Another one is the word lie. Everybody on both sides wants to accuse the other side of lying, forgetting that we
Hmm.
don't know their intent. And if we keep saying, liberalism is a mental disorder, or conservatism is a mental disorder, or Christianity is a mental disorder, or you can lead an atheist to truth, but you can't make him think. I mean, if you want to say that one or the other side is deluded or ignorant or whatever, you can't in the same breath say that they're just lying, because now you're saying that they're not deluded, that they do know the truth and they're intentionally trying to deceive you by saying, lies. But you don't know that they're lying. And if we're wrong, then we're just wrong. I mean, let's
Yes.
just say that I'm 100% wrong on everything. And I'm spouting exactly what I believe, and everything that's coming out of my mouth is 100% wrong. That does not mean that I'm, just out there lying to everybody. That means that I'm out there, totally misinformed. It means that I have no clue what I'm talking about. But if I'm sincere in what I'm saying and sincere in how I believe, it means I'm not lying. I'm not trying to deceive
Yes.
people. Stop accusing everybody of being liars. I don't care what side you're on. Don't do that. If you're going to have a constructive conversation on anything, don't just come right out and saying, you're just lying. Like, don't do that.
Yeah.
Unless there's actual evidence that they really do, that they really are lying. And that's really hard to get.
Yeah. Well, it has happened, but that's a
I
whole
see it happen
that's
all the time.
that's a whole different topic, and it has happened on both sides of the spectrum. Let me say it. Um, that's
Well,
as
I don't
far
think
as
it's a
way
different
as I
topic.
can. But it's not. Yeah, it could be. part of the topic. So we're
It's definitely part of the topic, because the topic is interacting with creationists or evangelists. Don't do that. Don't accuse them of lying. You don't interact with them in a good way by accusing them of lying, or vice versa.
Rule 1, at least to start out with. We're over an hour in. I think we should cut it short here. I want to give a shout to the chat if anyone has a last question they want to have addressed. So
speak now or forever hold your peace.
Are we married now?
What?
I asked if we were married now.
Go sleep on the couch.
Yeah. Okay. I see no questions.
Give them time to type. Damn it. Some of them don't type 100 words a minute.
Questions.
Yeah, but we've only given them like 15 seconds to answer. So yeah, don't accuse your opponent in the conversation of lying.
My
77
says,
he's got nothing.
Got nothing. Well, at least thanks for joining us, my 77 cents. I still don't remember your first name. You gave it to us in the chat back then, but thanks for dropping by and thanks for listening. I want to thank Keith for listening.
We're both old, though. We don't remember your name.
Sorry?
I said we're both old and we don't remember his name.
Yeah, that would make me a lot older again, because I am.
Oh, he said he doesn't think he did. Okay.
Yeah, he gave us a name we could address him with, I think. But I could be mistaken. At least thanks for dropping by, Keith. Thanks for dropping by, and Steve as well. Max was in earlier, and he said he would be listening back to this. So thanks all for your time, and see you all with maybe a different topic to see if we can mind the gap. Anything you want to say?
I'm just reading the chat. He was quoting me in a different topic when I said his name as my 77 cents, and he quoted what I said. I said that really rolls off the tongue. I just find that amazing. Okay. Look at the chat.
No closing arguments?
As he says, nope, I got nothing.
Could be. I'm not sure. I could be mistaken. Could be someone else.
What?
I don't know. Who gave his name?
Oh, okay. Yeah, probably.
So, no closing remarks, Charis?
Yeah, normally I would have one. I could go on, but we kind of set the time for a little bit shorter than our usual, 3 or 4 hours, just for the mental well-being of our listeners. Looking at the time on this, like 4 hours. So trying to avoid that.
Yeah.
So I should just cut it short for now, and if we want to do a part 2, we might. Let us know in the comments, guys. Should we do a part 2 of this?
Give us some feedback if this was helpful and you want to hear more and more often. Just let us know.
And don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you decide to, and put a like. That would be greatly appreciated. Share this video on your Twitter feed.
I forget every time, but you're 100% correct.
I know I am.
So, yeah. See you all next time. Bye.
Bye.